Welcome to the Menopause and Cancer podcast, where we speak with cancer patients, survivors, and incredible experts in their fields to help us find solutions to our symptoms and ideas to improve our health. My name is Dani Binnington, and today we want to be talking about the most empowering technique that you can implement into your life that has a huge transformational benefit on your physical, mental, and emotional health. It is the power and the healing effects of a yoga practice. And I'm joined by the pioneer of helping and teaching yoga to those affected with a history of cancer. And that is Vicky Fox. You might know Vicky Fox as Yoga for Cancer. It's her handle on Instagram. Vicky has done incredible things for the yoga community, for yoga teachers who she teaches, but also for everyone in our community. She's really changed the landscape of what it means to teach yoga for those affected by cancer. Vicky is part of our menopause and cancer team. We recently went to Leeds to an all-day workshop at Maggie's, and Vicky, of course, had to travel with us to even run a 1-hour workshop. I wouldn't go anywhere without bringing Vicky, really. She's amazing. And so I can't wait to talk to her about what it means to teach people affected by cancer, and especially how you can start tapping into this healing benefit. We've got so many amazing studies proving us that yoga is amazing, that it can help us on so many different levels. I want to talk about all of that because it is really a strategy we can't ignore, and we've got to look at and see if this is something that we might benefit from as well. How exciting to sit here with you today, Vicky. Thank you for your time. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Dani. And you?
Very well. So it's actually my birthday, but I know when people are going to listen to this episode, it's going to be quite a few weeks after, because we are booking and planning and recording quite far in advance now. But it's a real joy for me to sit here on my birthday with you, Vicky. It's lovely.
Well, very happy birthday to you.
Thank you. As a yoga teacher myself, and as a cancer survivor who has found yoga to be the most transformative tool in my whole cancer survivorship journey, I found you before you even knew I existed on this earth. And when I did my own yoga teacher training, I Googled people that had an expertise in cancer, and you were the only one that came up. And I'm talking 12 years ago. And you were teaching classes at some of the most amazing yoga studios in London, and you had this reputation then already, and I know that has just grown. Vicky, tell us a bit about you and the amazing work you've done for a long, long time now.
Thank you, Dani, for that very nice introduction. I've been teaching yoga for about 16 years, and about sort of 5 years into my teacher training, I really wanted to do something more. I was always really fascinated with how yoga can help with injuries or how yoga can be supportive. I've also, from my own experience, found how amazing yoga can be, as you suggested. When in my sort of challenging moments, being on my yoga mat has just been a bit of a savior for me, I have to admit. And I was looking out for trainings and things I could do that could maybe give back and support people. And I found an amazing teacher. She came over from America. She did yoga for survivors. I'm not sure how well survivors translates in the UK, because I work with a lot of people that would say they're thriving or they're living or they're impacted. They wouldn't necessarily describe themselves as surviving. But so I took her training, and that was the beginning of it. And along the way, I was very lucky because Jonathan Satin, who owned Tri Yoga, one of London's biggest yoga studios, was very up for and very positive about the ideas of starting some free classes. And I was I really felt that these classes should be free, that a lot of people were, unable to work. If you're self-employed, you're not getting paid. If you've got children, you've got childcare, you might have to stay in hospitals, you might have to take taxis. And it's a very expensive thing being impacted by cancer. And I wanted the classes to be free so that anybody could join. If you just heard the words, you've had cancer, this class will be available to you. And I didn't want anyone to feel they couldn't show up or couldn't turn up because money was, putting them off. So I was very grateful, and I'm still very grateful to Jonathan Satin for giving me that opportunity to set up free classes. And then it just sort of grew from there. And since 2020, I've been running trainings as well, so training teachers as well.
Yeah. And I reached out to you, and I know you can't remember that, but maybe if you went through your inbox, that email would still be there. And I reached out to you saying, I am a young yoga teacher. I'm on my training. I want to know more about supporting people with a history of cancer. And you sent me some amazing resources and were incredibly helpful. And so, yeah, thank you for that. It was my very early days of knowing that I want to share some of what's been so transformative for me, with others in my community. Let's talk about some myths, Vicky, because in the many years I've been teaching yoga now, and I am sure the same is true for you, people often say to me, I can't come to yoga because I'm not flexible enough. Have you heard that?
Yeah, I've heard that many a time. Yeah, people say, oh, oh, I can't even bend down, I can't even touch the floor. I'm like, you don't need to touch the floor. And what do you normally do when you try to touch the floor? Like put your shoes on, you just bend your knees. So yes, I think sometimes Instagram's not so helpful with, when you watch people, I watch people on Instagram that I would just say were hypermobile. So they can get themselves into very ridiculous shapes, very, very bendy shapes. And you don't need to be bendy to come to yoga. I think yoga is as much of a workout for your mind as it is for your physical body. But yeah, I hear that a lot. You do not need to be flexible. In fact, I would say being inflexible is actually makes yoga easier because you can feel the stretch. Someone who's very mobile doesn't feel the stretch. They have to keep pushing and pushing. But actually, if you're inflexible, you're going to feel the stretch pretty quickly. You'll know exactly where you're supposed to be feeling something.
And so I want to speak to everyone at home listening to our conversation now. For all of you that have tried yoga and you continuously go and turn up to your yoga classes and you step onto your mat, really think, what does it do for you, and anchor into that feeling. For anyone that has been to yoga and not really kept going, inquire what that was. Was it the teacher? Some teachers have a really annoying voice for you and for the individual, and you might have to change and find a teacher that that resonates with you. Or maybe it wasn't the right time, or maybe you haven't found the class at the right time of the week for you, because it always needs to suit you and your life. Or for someone that hasn't really ever stepped onto the yoga mat, do think, what is the reservation for you? What are your why you don't want to do yoga? Because many people say to me, actually, I just don't think I could sit in the quiet. I can't still my mind. And isn't yoga all about that calm mind? Is that a myth or sort of a misconception that have you come across?
Yeah, I think that is a huge challenge for people, that idea that the mind has to be really calm. And I can remember my first ever meditation class I went to, just thinking, oh my gosh, I looked around the room, judging everybody from their outsides, not having a clue what was going on their insides. And everybody looked on the outside very calm and peaceful, sitting meditating. I was like, wow, I'm rubbish at this. I am so crap at this. And it was when everything quietened down that I realized, firstly, how judgmental my mind was. I was like, wow, I'm really a judgmental person. I had no idea. I'm sitting here with all these judgmental thoughts, mostly about myself. I realized I have this very horrible inner critic called Vicky. She's actually not very nice. She's in my head a lot of the time. So I think a lot of yoga is, sitting with that uncomfortable feeling of like, wow, this is what's going on for me right now. And you know what? It's okay. It's okay. And it's why we call it a yoga practice. It's like you're constantly coming back to your mat. And that's the bravest thing. I think whenever people show up every week on their mats, I'm like, oh, wow, I'm so impressed. It's like you're showing up each week because it's challenging. It's really hard to be there and to notice what's coming up, and then to find another anchor into just being more present. But actually the present moment, as we know, when you're impacted by cancer, can be a very painful place to be.
Yeah, and hard to find because your thoughts often take you into the past, or they rush into the future, a worry, a fear, and so often inaccessible to be in the present moment. I remember when I used to start to meditate, and I went on a yoga retreat to India, and that was many years ago now. I think I just embarked on my yoga teacher training, and I didn't want to get up, so I would have rather quite liked to sleep in, and their meditations were very early on. So I thought, oh God, I've got to get up. But now I'm doing my yoga teacher training. I'm going to worry that everyone's going to judge me if I don't turn up, if I just decide to sleep in. But what I needed was a kip. And then my back, I just thought, oh gosh, all I could think of, I can't sit straight. My back was sort of hurting. I was just so uncomfortable. And then I thought, well, don't move, because if you move, then people are going to think you're not properly meditating and you're not in the zone. So I was trying not to move. Then my hips seized up. And that was just once. It was a long, long time of sort of being in this uncomfortable seated poses, thinking, what the heck am I doing? But I'm just going to pretend. And I don't know whether I, faked it until I made it. I can't remember what happened, Vicky, but yeah, I echo your experience of meditation. I wonder what people must have lots of funny meditation stories. As a yoga teacher for so many years, when someone does a blow off in meditation, for example, you just know everyone's thinking of the fart that has escaped.
Yeah, completely.
And
and they're
everyone's
so
pretending.
normal.
Yeah. And you just know everyone's pretending to still be in the zone, but everyone really wants to just crack up and laugh. Anyway, this is a side story. Vicky, tell me about teaching not hundreds, not thousands, but tens and thousands of people impacted by cancer on the yoga mat. What benefits do they tell you have they experienced from your classes?
Wow, they can really range from, I often start the class with asking people what they would like from the class. I get requests. I'm like, okay, what are your requests today? And what side effects are you dealing with? Because that's mostly what we're dealing with is side effects. So it can range from just people saying, I feel really flat today. I feel really low. It was a challenge. I thought about not coming to this class, but you know what, I feel really flat. So people will then say at the end, wow, I just feel better. I feel better from being in the class and breathing and moving. So, that maybe can't be measured, but that's one thing that I'll get. People saying it's helping with that anxiety. So, some breathing, moving, using the breath and movement. My classes are quite flowy, so there's quite a lot to be focusing on. I find that quite a good way to help people stay present. So there's a physical feeling, sensations going on in the body, as well as you're moving with your breath. So there's quite a lot to distract you also while you're in the class. And then there's the physical side effects. People will say things like lymphedema, the chronic swelling that they might have in arms and legs. Their arms feel lighter for 24 hours, 48 hours afterwards, or they can move their arms better. People will report, other side effects having been made just that bit easier, or that they're working on their balance, which is challenging because they have peripheral neuropathy, but actually through the yoga, because balance is a skill you can learn and relearn. So, they've got better at their balance, or maybe they've got more flexible about falling through yoga, because it's important to learn to fall. Or people have come back and said, my DEXA scans have improved. So my bone density has improved through my yoga practice. There are many sort of aspects of it. So some from the mental aspect. Some people even just say, I can breathe easier. So it was really hard for me to breathe when I came in here. And we know that when you breathe more into the chest, this is more stimulating for the sympathetic side of the nervous system. Now they're starting to breathe more into the diaphragm, more into the belly. Well, we know that stimulates the parasympathetic, the rest and digest side of the nervous system, which is probably I would say the most important thing we do in class is breathing and moving with the breath, but the breathing, because it allows your body to repair. And if you're going through treatment or you're post-treatment, it's just giving your body that ability to start to nourish and nurture itself again. So that's so important. Maybe that's not an immediate thing you feel, but people often say, gosh, I can just breathe more easily now.
And it's interesting because yoga is almost like a door, and it gives you access to many other modalities. So I know that from myself, but also from many other people, that once you practice yoga, you have a little bit more of an access to breath. Well, for many people, that opens the door to breath work, which we know is incredibly powerful and healing and has so many benefits. We know it can also access towards mindfulness and a little bit more towards meditation, and just sort of pave the way a little bit. And I know you said that's very difficult to measure sometimes when people step on the mat with you, but I was always very curious about the actual evidence behind yoga. And I just wanted to make very clear to everyone that what we're talking about today is not something that Vicky and I decide that we think this is the benefit. We actually have 34 randomized controlled trials that included yoga with cancer survivors as a therapeutic element. And so we have lots and lots of evidence about the benefits of yoga. And when you think a randomized controlled trial is the golden standard of finding out evidence if something is effective or ineffective. And we have randomized controlled trials for yoga for people who have survived trauma, victims of the war, for example, war veterans, with incredibly amazing data there. And lots on cancer survivors. And so a systematic review of 2023, and I just want to sum up to people because I think it's really powerful, included 34 randomized controlled trials were included in this review. And yoga benefited the physical function, mental health, and overall quality of life of cancer survivors. The impact of yoga on quality of life of cancer survivors ranged from, listen to this, moderate to high. Now, I want to put this into context because we have some randomized controlled trials where, for example, the whole world bases their decision-making process on maybe giving a medication or not giving a medication. We might only have one and not 34. And the impact might only show minimal, for example, of a benefit. And sometimes the outcome is inconclusive. And we still base our decision-making process on all of those, maybe just the one randomized control trial. So we know the benefit of physical, mental, and overall quality of life of yoga is huge. And I'm going to link to that analysis in the show notes, because I feel like knowing the impact that it's moderate to high, we've really got to think, hang on a minute, should we include this for all cancer survivors as an option? The conclusion here was yoga has health benefits for cancer survivors and could therefore be used as an optional supportive intervention for cancer-related symptom management. And with this amount of evidence, I think we'd all be foolish to ignore it.
Yeah. I mean, they've always said sort of if exercise was a pill, it would be subscribed by every single doctor everywhere. We know that, I think it would, especially in the UK with our NHS system, where it would certainly take a strain off the NHS if more people had access to other things. Because what I regularly hear from people is that often there is either no support for side effects or very little support for side effects. They don't know who to go back to. I work a lot with women, and I know this is a very generalization about women, but they do not want to burden anybody. They feel like they've had their treatment, they're grateful they're alive, they really don't want to then go back, they don't even know who to go back to, but to start to say, actually, I'm alive and that's great, but I've got all these side effects and I don't really know what I can do about them. And the great thing about yoga is, I think, is that it's very empowering. You can empower people with information. So I try to teach people in my classes what we're doing and why we're doing it. Like, we're doing this breath work because this breath work is said to be calming for the nervous system. Try it, we do it. And then he's like, how does it feel? You experience it yourself. But also just knowing that moving the body is going to be really helpful for things like peripheral neuropathy, for lymphedema, there's a lot more. I teach a lot of people with radiation fibrosis. That's areas of the body that have become very tight due to radiation, and that doesn't show up immediately afterwards. That can show up sometimes months down the line. And actually, we need to be constantly stretching. Unfortunately, it's going to have to be a daily thing where people just put yoga into their lives. But this can really empower somebody when you think, oh, well, I've got this side effect and I'll just have to live with it. But actually, if there are some things you could do at home that are going to make that a little bit easier, even if it's temporary, because we know things like lymphedema is a chronic condition. So it may be that just your arm feels lighter or you can move it more, maybe just for a short period of time, after your practice, and then you need to keep doing that practice. It's going to be like brushing your teeth. It's just something you're going to have to incorporate into your daily life, in the same way you wouldn't consider getting up and not brushing your teeth. You think, okay, I have to get up and I have to stretch my body, or I have to do some exercises that help pump and move my lymphatic system, because that's just going to be essential for my life.
One thing that always sort of stuck with me personally, and I know this is very hard to quantify unless you measure blood, you measure people with blood tests, and that is that stress hormone. So cortisol, we know, is very much measurable in the blood, and we know from lots of studies that when you embark people on, say, a 12-week yoga course weekly, and there were measured their cortisol levels in their blood, they were shown to have lower cortisol levels than the group that was randomized to not benefiting from yoga, and they might have done other type of exercise. I want to differentiate here. It's not any type of exercise. We know specific data is really attributed to the yoga practice, and it's probably very hard to know why. Why is it? But there is something very calming. It might be to do with the breath work. It's different to Pilates. It's different to when you're lifting weights. You do not get the same benefits in all other types of exercises. But personally, when my mind was so focused on just worrying about the future, or so traumatized by what's happened in the past, the release for the hour was good enough for me because I was in such a state. And so what you say is very fitting, even emotionally. I knew as soon as I stepped off the mat and I drove back home, my sort of negative thinking and that downward spiraling thought might kick in again. But just knowing that I could take a breather whilst I was on the mat, like my breathing stopped from sitting up there in like the top part of my chest up to my shoulders, up there. It just sort of slowed down a bit whilst I was on the mat. And so that gave me the empowerment I needed to think I can edge myself towards that state more and more often again. And it was just the ignition, like you say, that empowerment piece is key. And I want to empower people also with the facts, which is why I read out the meta-analysis, because it's so important to understand this isn't something just you're going to experience. This is something that has been heavily researched, and we have plenty of data for it. And it might take time and it might be different things, right? So people come with a different focus. I know, because I've been to some of your classes, people often say to you, I just need, what about my bones? Yoga is no good for me because I think I just need to lift weights to look after my bone health. And I know you've got something to say about that.
Yeah, I do. And actually, funnily enough, that we can even start with the breathing to do with bone health, because you're so right. I mean, the interesting thing about breathing, I always say, is it's free of charge. You take it everywhere you go. It's the quickest way you can impact your nervous system. And you talked about cortisol levels. Well, when cortisol levels are high, we know this is not good for our bones, because our body is not going about repairing when we're in that sort of more fight or flight, that more sympathetic side of our nervous system. The breath is how you can dial out of sympathetic into parasympathetic. And when we're in parasympathetic, that's when we are able to do things like build our bones and repair our bodies. So it's firstly, the first thing for our bones is breathing. Getting back into diaphragmatic breathing. You talked about the breath being up here in the chest. We know that that is stimulating that sympathetic, that fight or flight. Trying to encourage people to get the breath a little deeper, even just lying down, hands on your tummy, feeling the breath move into your tummy, trying to get more diaphragmatic breathing. That's the first starting point, I would say, always for anything, but especially you want us to talk about building bone strength. The other thing about bone strength is that, you know, we can measure bone density, but the one thing that's hard to measure is bone quality. And the bone quality is massively improved when we do yoga, because the bone quality is all the connective tissue, the fascia around the bone, because bone itself is fascia. It's a lattice work of cells. And so we're building that strength in the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments, the connective tissue. So the structure around the bone becomes incredibly strong. And actually you can have very low bone density and very high bone quality and be at low risk of fractures, because the quality of the bone is strong. When we're exercising and that muscle is tugging on the bone, when we're moving the body, that is stimulating the osteoblasts, the bone building cells, and that is helping us to build strength. There's a lot more emerging evidence that I think we need to be doing some sort of weight strengthening work. We know that balancing does help with that, because when you balance obviously on one leg, you're putting double, you know, the body weight that would normally be going down two is now just going down through one. So things like that are really important. And I think for a lot of people, they may not be able to be lifting heavy weights. That might be contraindicated for a lot of people for whatever conditions they have going on. So for some people, yoga will be the practice that will help them to build that bone quality, to keep the bone strong, so that if they are at risk, if there is a risk that they could fracture, they're actually going to build that strength. As you know, hopefully, as well as building some bone density strength as well.
And I think yoga can be anything you want it to be, isn't it? Sometimes people have an idea about yoga, what it is, because either they've seen something on social media, like you've mentioned earlier, or they've tried it in the past and they keep thinking back to that class at that village hall and it wasn't for them and it was really boring. And sometimes people feel like they really want a workout. And sometimes people feel like I can't even get off the floor. So I have people coming and they have not come back in some cases to some of my classes because there was too many transitions. You had to be quite mobile to get from your knees into standing and to sort of move through. How do people go to sort of access that? Because I always think it's a bit like finding your perfect cup of tea. Like, I don't know, what tea do you drink? Do you drink builder's tea, Vicky? What kind of tea do you drink?
I don't actually drink a lot of builder's tea, but no, I like a
What tea do you
peppermint tea
drink?
every now and then. I like a turmeric latte, a few things like that. But
All
yeah,
right,
no,
so
it just,
that's your cup of tea. But, some
yeah,
people love an Earl Grey and other people will just have a PG
of
Tips.
course.
And it's
Yeah,
the
and
same
a bit
with
like life,
yoga, right? So,
you cannot, yeah, and it's like life, you can't please everybody. So there'll be, I'm sure, people that have come to my class that have disliked my class, and there have been people I know that have come to my class and found it too gentle, and they wanted to be back on the mat and doing maybe more of a vinyasa class. I mean, mine is vinyasa actually, because it's moving with breath, which is vinyasa yoga. But I'm not doing a lot of big weight bearing things that might be contraindicated for someone with lymphedema or at risk of lymphedema. I'm helping people build back strength slowly. So for some people, my classes are transition, maybe back to their regular classes. And for some people, they feel very comfortable coming to my class because they know that they're going to be safely supported. But yeah, it's totally, it's such a personal thing, and people get maybe used to my styles. They know the class is going to be gentle. People describe it as being gentle, but with some hidden challenges, which I quite like. So it's like, sort of discreetly, somehow I'll put in things because I do want to challenge people. I think if you only give people a very gentle practice, you're actually missing out on some of the huge benefits. We do need to be building back muscle strength. We know, I read somewhere the other day that you lose about 3% of your quadricep muscle for every day, you are inactive. So if you're in hospital on bed rest and you're not able to move, you're starting to lose your quadricep muscle. And we know we start to lose our glutes when we sit on them for long periods of time. Your core switches off. These are really important muscles that make daily activities easy. Getting out of bed, standing in a shower, going downstairs, carrying your shopping home, picking up children, grandchildren, whatever it is that you want to be able to do in life. You're not helping people, I don't think, if you're not giving them some of that. So I do like to put in some strength work, but I don't want to deplete people either. And there are some things I never do. Like I never do any prone work in my class, lying on your tummy, only because that's often challenging. And remember that mostly my classes are group work. So if you're working one-to-one, it's a different thing. But a lot of people find it struggle to lie on their tummy post-Diet flap reconstructions. People find it struggle to lie on their tummies, when they've had breast reconstruction, and that can last for quite a long period of time. So I just skip those. I'm like, right, don't put those in my class. I can get the same benefits in other poses. So I just switch it around and make sure that I can support everybody that comes into my class. But it won't be for everybody, like that cup of tea.
Yeah, but that's the good thing because I want to encourage people to go and find their cup of yoga tea wherever they are, with whether they want to join someone online, but you've got to try. And I think sometimes we're not doing ourselves the service to go and look for maybe the second or the third class until you've really found something that works for you for the moment. I think we've got to go out and explore. It's very likely that you turn up to your first yoga class with a practitioner and that you don't just love it. I think you've got to give it time, but also go and do a little bit of yoga class shopping. And it kind of like brings me to two different types of people that I've had through the door. It's either the people who want to share with you immediately what their history is. They tell you about maybe an ailment, their lower back, that they're in depression, what they're hoping the yoga practice will do to them, or they've had a history of cancer, or you get people that don't say anything and that just want to be as normal as possible. And further down the line, you find out that they've just had a knee operation like the day before they came to class. No, that's exaggerated, but you know. And I've definitely been both. I've definitely been the yogi who's gone to other people's classes and just pretended I've never ever had a single problem in my life, including a physical problem, because I just wanted to not be the patient or the person affected by cancer. And I've had some amazing yoga teachers where I felt really comfortable in saying, look, I am not going to lift my left arm above my shoulder today. Or can you give me a modification because I've had all of my lymph nodes removed and it doesn't feel great. What can I do? What do you think? Is there a recommendation what you think people should do? How do we get the most out of going to yoga?
Well, I mean, the advantages of having a specific class for people with cancer is that obviously your needs will be being met, and you'll have a teacher that will understand, and they will just throw in I throw in loads of modifications all the time, so people don't have to necessarily come with a big long list of what it is that they're you know. And I exactly same thing that you've just said. You know, some people will come and tell you everything, and you'll get a really good history on people, and other people, they just want to come and do the class. They don't want to actually, and they don't want to regurgitate things that have been happening to them. They actually just want to switch off and come into the class and just have you know, look after them. So I think, you know, if you can understand how to modify what might someone be going through, what might the limitations be, then you can throw in these modifications. You don't have to have such detailed information from people. And often, you know, I have quite big group classes. I have an online class on a Sunday that gets sort of, you know, somewhere around 30 people turn up. So I try to keep up with a lot of people, but you know, they just throw out what their requests are for that day. And, you know, we try and sort of fit those into a class, and that seems to work really well. So, yeah, I think, you know, you should try out different classes and find some things that work for you. And that, you know, because there are so many different styles. You could go from a restorative class where you're draped over bolsters for an hour and a quarter, just breathing and just being supported, to something that's really flowy and you get quite sweaty. So I think, you know, it's good to find something that works for you, and with a good experienced teacher that can at least understand, okay, maybe this might not be perfect for you, or this is contraindicated for you. And a teacher that understands safe forward folding, safe ways of twisting, so that you're not going to do any harm. You know, as a yoga teacher, we should be practicing ahimsa, meaning non-harming. It's the first limb of yoga in the ancient texts on yoga. So we want to make sure we're not doing any harm first, I suppose. So we want to, you know.
Is this why you thought you wanted to develop a training for yoga teachers to get better training for teaching people with a history of cancer? Did you see the need that actually it can be really helpful if someone has a better understanding of the impact of cancer treatment and hence becomes a better yoga teacher almost for this group of people?
Yeah, because I think, you know, we can all relax when we feel like we're properly supported. You want to be intelligently supported by someone that does actually understand what you're going through. So when you start to talk about the treatment that you're going through, they have a knowledge of what those side effects might be, so they know how to support you. They can understand. They don't need you to explain the medical terminology or the challenges. They can also help normalize some of the confusion and fear. I think it's less isolating. You know, you feel less lonely when someone is, you know, I understand I hear what you're going through, I understand it. I do always say on my teacher trainings, though, you know, treat the person, not the cancer, because everyone's unique. And as you know, Dani, from your personal experience and all the thousands and thousands of people you've also worked with, that everyone is different. You can have on paper the exact same diagnosis, and yet two totally different people, two totally different experiences. So I think that is very important, that you are treating the person and not the cancer. Do not assume you know something and put that, misunderstanding onto people. So, but I do feel that there are some common things that are important. So there are some contraindications that we need to be mindful of if someone has osteoporosis and we don't have the ability to have x-ray vision. And you might have someone very young with osteoporosis in parts of their body due to treatment that they've had. So we do want to support people. If someone is at risk of lymphedema, now there is no rhyme or reason why some people get lymphedema and some people don't, but you want to make sure you're not doing something that could possibly make someone end up with lymphedema. So I think you want to make a safe practice and create also, this lovely community. I think that's another nice thing that you're going to get from classes. So I did want to set up classes that could create community. And I think my training, I always teach people is vinyasa. So it's moving with the breath, because I think that helps you stay more present. You've got something else to focus on other than just the breathing. There's the movement as well. And also a vinyasa class is more accessible to different people, because if you want to go really deep into a pose, you've got, a body that's a little bit stronger, you could go into sort of warrior two in the full expression of warrior two. If you're maybe a bit older and you maybe have lost some muscle strength, you can be doing smaller versions of something dynamic. So it makes it more accessible to people. So there are certain key things I have in my training that I think are really important. And I've been chatting to Dr. Nina Fuller-Chauvel about, I think we do need to set up some sort of basic level of what people should have when you're working with people with cancer, a basic level of understanding and knowledge that I think is really important.
I think one of the biggest things is the community, but I always think it's the community with yourself as well. So it's the connection inwards that is and can be so strong, and so you can really knit. It's like knitting a thick scarf with the biggest wool, and you can knit that connection back to your body. And when you think of really big knitting needles and like a big yarn, a big ball of yarn, and you knit this biggest scarf. And for me, it felt like I was knitting my way back into my own body. So physically, I was reconnecting with a body that was broken. I always felt my body gave me cancer, and then the medical system and the treatment that helped me to stay alive broke me even more so. So I was broken bodied, and so I was knitting my way back to the presence in my body, and I was becoming stronger. I loved watching myself. Like, it was so empowering. When you use the word empowering, it's sort of really thinking, oh my gosh, I can recover. I could literally feel myself heal every time I stepped on a mat. Before I knew it, I was doing shoulder stands and things I hadn't imagined of doing. And I felt my downward dogs. It was wonderful. Like, I was knitting my way back into that health, but also knitting myself into that community, which was amazing, because yoga goes both ways, right? It goes inwards. It's your practice, but you also can do it in the presence of other people. And even if it's online, that knowledge that so many people are all battling their own little wars and their problems, and lives are difficult. In general, I think life and being alive means it's a difficult thing to do. And if you're going through a patch where life is easy and everyone around you is well, and you've got enough money, and you live in a country where there's no war and you've got enough food, then you're going through a really lucky patch. Like, be really grateful for it. But in general, the millions of people that are on this planet, there is a lot of suffering. And to knit your awareness back into that community, however little or however much you want to do that, it's wonderful with yoga. I don't know anywhere else where you can feel so present, so wrapped up, so supported. We've gone on holidays from our local yoga community. We've gone on retreats. We go out together. I run a men's yoga class, for example, and they go off to the pub and they have the best time after yoga. And I think it's wonderful, and you can do as much or as little as you want of all of that, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. I love that visual of knitting, and then you've knitted this big, massive scarf or shawl you can wrap yourself up in. Yeah, it is so important. And yeah, I always say to people that join my classes, you can do as much of this class or as little as class as you want. If you get halfway through and you want to just lie with your legs up the wall or go into Shavasana, I'll know you're doing good yoga, because the first limb of yoga is that kindness, that ahimsa, non-harming, non-violence, being kind to yourself. So if you're doing something that looks like you're being kind to yourself, that's brilliant. And I joke, because when I used to go to yoga classes, I would try and please the teacher, because I'm a desperate people pleaser. And so I would be like, the teacher would like go into child's pose or downward dog. And I'd be like in my head thinking, okay, what is she going to think is the better pose for me to be in? I think she thinks downward dog would be better. So I'm going to stay in downward dog, even though I'm really tired. I'd quite like to come into child's pose. I'm going to stay in downward dog because that's going to please the teacher. I'm like, you know what? That's not going to work with me, because I'm going to look at you. And if I see you're doing something kind, I'm going to think you're doing the best yoga practice. So don't be like me and try and please your teacher. It's not a good thing.
I hope people are going to go out shopping for a suitable yoga class at the end of that conversation, that they're not going to worry if there's ever a blow off in any of their shavasanas. Don't please your teacher. Just do whatever the heck you want to do. Like, empower yourself to just make it your practice. So tell me about that Sunday class. Is that online, Vicky? Do you run that every Sunday?
Yeah, so every Sunday we have as a purely online. I mean, actually, all my classes are live streamed. So even if you can't get to a physical studio, every single class I teach has a live stream side to it. But I teach a class on a Sunday. We started that during lockdown, and it just grew into a big class and a great community. And so, people come on. I always come on early so people can chat before class. And you'll get a lot of mixed, someone will come and say, oh, gosh, my lymphedema is really bad. Can you do something for that? And then someone else will say, oh, that thing you did last week, that really worked for me. And then someone else will say, oh my gosh, I've got this new sleeve. Have you heard about these new sleeves? Da, da, da. And then they'll put a link up for where you can get these amazing new sleeves. And there's this really fantastic community. People really share with each other. And if someone comes on saying they're having a bad day, you'll get someone else giving a big hug on the screen, and, or just people nodding. And there's that, yeah, I get you. Okay, I don't know exactly what it feels like to be you, but I get that feeling of you feel crap today. Yeah, and that's okay. It's okay to come to class and feel crap. You probably will feel better, but you don't need to feel good to come to class, And so it's a great community. I love that class. Yeah.
It's so nice to just be able to show up with who you are and with what you've got, isn't it? And you just give it a go. I haven't prepared this at all, and I have no idea what your surroundings are at the moment, Vicky. I think you are in your yoga space. Have you got a one of your lovely poems or readings around you in vicinity? Anything? I know you read such amazing poems and sayings, and you've got books and books full of stuff. Is there anything around you? Anything
I
that you
do
could reach?
actually. Weirdly, I do. I have this remedy. Have you read John Rodell's remedy? There's a few in here which are really
we'd love
lovely.
for you to read.
How
Do you
much
want
time
to
have you
just
got?
maybe open a page? Well, just whatever you want to read for us,
Okay.
because I think words are so powerful in yoga. So
Okay. Well, I love John Rodell. So John Rodell writes really fabulous poetry, but this is part of a poem, because it's actually very, very long, this one. Last evening, my gut asked me if I was having a hard time being caught between my heart and my head. I nodded. I said I didn't know if I could live with either of them anymore. My heart is always sad about something that happened yesterday, while my head is always worried about something that may happen tomorrow. I lamented. My gut squeezed my hand. I just can't live with my mistakes of the past, or my anxiety about the future, I sighed. My gut smiled and said, in that case, you should go stay with your lungs for a while. I was confused. The look on my face gave it away. If you are exhausted about your heart's obsession with the fixed past and your mind's focus on the uncertain future, your lungs are the perfect place for you. There is no yesterday in your lungs. There is no tomorrow there either. There is only now. There is only inhale. There is only exhale. There is only this moment. There is only breath. And in that breath, you can rest while your heart and head work their relationship out. This morning, while my brain was busy reading tea leaves, and while my heart was staring at old photographs, I packed a little bag and walked to the door of my lungs. Before I could even knock, she opened the door with a smile, and as a gust of air embraced me, she said, "What took you so long?"
That's beautiful. That's
I like that
beautiful.
one.
I like that one. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh,
I hope you all find a bit of access into your lungs today, me included.
yes.
I was very much in my head or in my gut, maybe, for the last 24 hours. Um, for all of us to knit back our connection to our bodies, into our communities. Thank you for being such a community maker, Vicky. I'm going to just link to all your classes in the show notes so people can join all of your free classes every single week from across the entire world and start knitting themselves back to their bodies. Thank you, Vicky.
Well,
You're
thank you,
amazing.
Dani, for everything you do as well, because really, having worked alongside you a few times, it's just fantastic to be able to see people be empowered. And I know I've used the word a couple of times, but I think it's really amazing to empower people to take back some control at a time when life feels like it's out of your control. And that's what you do in huge volume. So thank you, Dani, for everything you do.
Oh, so much gratitude for the amazing people in our community, isn't it? How lucky we are to be here and we get to have this
So lucky.
conversation and all of you at home, enjoy your moving. If you're moving today, if you're out on your dog walk and you've listened to Vicky, share some wisdom, and I'll talk to you on the podcast next week.